Senator Liana Brooks had just wrapped up her weekly visit to her father's home, taking a short detour afterward to a local shopping plaza for a few essentials. As she made her way through the parking lot to her vehicle, she was oblivious to the police cruiser that had just pulled in and parked a short distance behind her. Officer Mara Gibson, a seasoned law enforcement officer known for her no-nonsense approach, was patrolling her usual route when she noticed Liana. From where Mara was sitting, the scene looked suspicious. A lone woman moving around a deserted section of the lot, peering into her car windows as if searching for something. "What's going on here?" Mara muttered, her brows knitting. She parked her cruiser, got out, and started walking briskly toward Liana, her hand instinctively settling on her belt, just above her flashlight. Mara didn't recognize the woman, just another person she thought might be up to something out of place. "Excuse me, ma'am," Mara called out, her tone serious but calm. Liana turned, surprised to see an officer approaching her. She adjusted her shopping bag and gave a polite nod. "Good afternoon, officer. Is everything all right? What are you doing in this part of the lot?" Mara's voice was sharp, and she watched Liana closely. "I'm heading back to my car after picking up a few things," Liana replied, holding up her bag as if to underscore her point. "Can I see some ID, please?" Mara's expression remained unreadable, her fingers tapping her belt in impatience. Liana felt a twinge of discomfort, but remained composed. "I'm sorry, is there a reason?" "I haven't done anything wrong." Mara's gaze hardened. "Your ID, please. Let me be the judge of that." Liana sighed and opened her purse, pulling out her driver's license and handing it over. Mara took it, barely glancing at Liana as she examined the ID. "Senator Liana Brooks." Mara read aloud with mild surprise, but no recognition in her tone. "I don't know you, but let's see if this checks out." Liana nodded, speaking calmly. "I represent the 9th District in the State Senate." Unimpressed, Mara glanced at the ID again before tucking it into her pocket. "A senator? That doesn't give you any special privileges here." Liana's expression held steady. "Officer, I have every right to be here as any other citizen." Mara folded her arms, positioning herself in front of Liana's car. "Maybe you do, but I'd still like you to answer a few questions at the station." Liana's attempts to clarify the situation went unheeded as Mara guided her to the back of the cruiser. As they drove, Liana sat quietly, keeping her composure despite the mix of emotions stirring within her. Arriving at the station, Mara led Liana inside, where a few officers and detectives glanced up, clearly surprised to see a state senator brought in. One officer, Detective Raul Simmons, raised an eyebrow, recognizing her almost immediately. Mara led Liana into a small room, instructing her to wait, then left. After a short while, Lieutenant Marcus Grant entered. Tall and composed, he extended a polite hand toward Liana. "Senator Brooks, I'm Lieutenant Grant. I apologize if this is unnecessary, but may I ask what led to this situation?" Liana shook his hand, grateful for the courtesy. "Thank you, Lieutenant. I'm not entirely sure myself. I was loading my car with some shopping when Officer Gibson confronted me and brought me here without explanation." Marcus glanced over a brief report Mara had hastily filled out. "It says here that Officer Gibson observed suspicious behavior, but shopping hardly seems to qualify as such." Just then, Mara entered the room, still holding Liana's ID and unaware of Marcus's conversation with the senator. "Here's the ID, Lieutenant." She was wandering around the parking lot, and I thought. Marcus interrupted, his expression darkening. "Officer Gibson, this is Senator Liana Brooks. You're aware she's one of the state's respected leaders, correct?" Mara faltered. I didn't realize." "Well, officer," Marcus continued, a steely edge to his voice, "you may have overstepped your authority here. Bringing her in without sufficient cause shows poor judgment." Mara's face flushed, her confidence visibly wavering. I didn't mean." Liana rose from her chair, her voice composed but firm. "Lieutenant, I'm willing to overlook this misunderstanding. However, I believe an explanation from Officer Gibson is warranted." Mara shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Marcus and Liana. "Senator, I assumed I was just following protocol." Marcus shook his head, disappointment clear in his gaze. Protocol doesn't involve baseless arrests, officer. This department has no room for impulsive assumptions. By now, a few officers had gathered near the doorway, exchanging whispers as they watched the scene unfold. Mara could sense the atmosphere shift, the respect she once commanded now tinged with doubt and disappointment. Marcus finally addressed her firmly. Officer Gibson, I'm placing you on temporary leave, pending an internal review. Mara swallowed hard, managing only a nod, recognizing the gravity of her actions. Liana turned to Marcus with a composed smile. Thank you, Lieutenant. I'm relieved to know that the department upholds accountability. As she exited the station, Mara remained behind, her badge temporarily confiscated and her confidence shaken. The lesson was undeniable. Acting on assumptions rather than facts had brought swift consequences, and now she would be remembered as the officer who let prejudice cloud her judgment. The other officers continued their tasks, but the story spread quickly, leaving Mara alone to reflect on her choices. As Senator Liana Brooks stepped out of the station and into the fading light of the early evening, she felt a blend of relief and sadness. Her calm demeanor masked the frustration that simmered beneath the surface. She hadn't just been wronged as a senator, but as an ordinary citizen who had simply been running errands. She was a public servant, and she knew her role came with responsibility. Responsibility to ensure that moments like this served as a learning experience for all involved, not merely as an incident swept under the rug. Inside, Officer Mara Gibson sat quietly, alone in the empty room, her badge now a stark reminder of how quickly her career could shift. She had always believed she was just doing her job, but that belief had blinded her to the biases she carried. It wasn't until now, when the consequences had come down so suddenly, that she truly began to understand how her assumptions had impacted others, tarnishing not only her own reputation, but also the integrity of the uniform she wore. Liana, standing in the parking lot, resolved to use this experience as a foundation for something constructive. She knew the issue wasn't isolated. Stories like hers played out for countless individuals across communities. Bias, often unacknowledged, can lead to actions that unfairly harm people, creating distrust and division between citizens and those meant to protect them. As Liana thought about it, a plan began to form, a vision to bridge the gap between law enforcement and community members, creating an environment where assumptions were replaced with understanding and suspicion with empathy. The next morning, Liana called a press conference, not to condemn, but to educate. She shared her story and announced her commitment to initiating community police dialogue forums statewide, designed to allow citizens and officers to listen, share, and learn from one another. Her aim was clear: to foster an environment where justice was guided by fairness, where each person's humanity was respected. The moral of this story lies in the need for empathy, awareness, and restraint. Prejudice, whether conscious or not, can lead to harmful actions, but it is only through reflection and accountability that individuals can grow. Officer Gibson's lapse served as a reminder that authority must always be exercised with humility and responsibility. And for Liana, her experience reinforced that leadership requires not only action, but also compassion. The path forward wasn't just about mending her personal experience, but about building a future where fairness and understanding replaced judgment and fear. In doing so, she hoped to create a legacy where each voice mattered and each encounter carried respect.